I suppose it makes sense to start from the beginning. My grandpa's funeral was brief, which honestly was what he would have preferred. He was, a man of brevity. The strangeness began when I met with his will attorney. He was an uninteresting looking man wearing an unassuming black suit and an uninspired effect. He greeted me with a quick and robotic, "Sorry for your loss," as we shook hands before we took both of our seats. My grandfather never had a lot of money, and I was not expecting to receive some hidden treasure of his when he passed. Honestly, I wasn't expecting anything. My client, Robert Alfred Sherman, instructed me to give you this letter upon his death. The lawyer spoke formally and methodically, acting on a stage of law and reciting a script he had read many times before. It was his wish that you would not open this letter until you have returned home. He left little specification otherwise. Do you have any other questions? I didn't. It seemed as relatively straightforward as Grandpa would have written it. After returning home, I placed the letter on my nightstand and I took a shower. I'm embarrassed to admit that I forgot about it until the day after. I was doing some chores around the house and, as I was cleaning my room, I remembered the letter. Grandpa was always an impatient man, and I figured it best not to make him wait even after his death. I ripped the envelope open and pulled out the letter. Surprisingly, it consisted of a few loose leaf pages of aged notebook paper. Like really aged. I would not be surprised if the paper seemed to have preceded me. None of this was like my grandpa. At least, not the one that I knew. The letter read, "Gabriel, there is so much that I've wanted to tell you, and so little that I was able to. There is a reason I didn't tell all of this to you before, and a reason that I am telling you now. I am sorry to have kept this from you for so long. Although I have always known how I would tell you, I have always wondered how it would feel. Where would I start? How would I explain it to you? You know very little about the man your grandfather truly was. I will try to be as concise as possible. As with any good story, I ought to start with the beginning. Your grandfather was a physicist and a philosopher. This you knew. What I did not tell you and what I did not tell anyone was the sort of work a physicist and a philosopher finds himself doing. Since I had started doing research with Kern, my focus has been on causality. How a cause leads to an effect. What causes lead to what effects. How the physical universe gives rise to the world that we experience, and to what extent our experiences as beings tied to the physical world are truly our own. How much agency do we truly have over our actions? I was a bit stunned. Of course I knew Grandpa was a philosopher. I knew that he was a physicist. I never knew that he worked for Kern. I never knew what he focused on. Why did he never tell me? I read on. To some extent, this has always been the goal of science. We hypothesize that one thing will lead to another. We then attempt to create conditions to test if, truly, that one thing will lead to another. When we attempt to replicate studies, we adopt all of the factors as perfectly as one is able to, and make limited attempts to find whether we can truly eliminate those pesky confinders. Those other factors we call chance. I became fascinated with the notion that perhaps something, perhaps everything, could be predicted. Perhaps truly, there is a way to create the perfect scientific study, to eliminate chance. I turned the crinkled page. I dedicated most of my academic research to the development of this idea. In the late 1950s, a few years after Kern had been created and after I had joined the ranks, I secretly created the first prototype of a computational system that would become known as the Laboratory Analysis of Perspective Longitudinal Act-Cause Engine, or the Laplace in shorthand. I designed the device to algorithmically analyze historical text and cross-reference them with others. It kept up with the news and current events, scanning and analyzing those causes which lead to future events. It measured sentiment of those involved, sentiments of the public before those events. It was granted the ability to determine which sets of causes were inseparably linked to some effect or effects, and then gave them a predictive power. I was so impressed, so proud, so filled with hubris at my creation. It began to create predictive models, and those models started small and somewhat accurately. It could tell me based on a year and origin of a penny, as well as current weather conditions and geographical location, whether the penny would land heads or tails. I was astounded. I had created the next big scientific breakthrough. What was he saying? That he could predict the future? That he was of somehow paranormal origin? I found this rather hard to believe, but I was obviously interested. Who wouldn't be? I had to keep reading. But it became far more sophisticated than I could have ever imagined. It began to predict future events. The assassination of John F. Kennedy in Dallas in 1963. The first manned mission to the moon occurring down to the moment that they landed. I was starting to become convinced that my grandfather was not all there. As though he had predicted this thought. He wrote, "I know that this all sounds ludicrous. You are a natural skeptic, just like your father and just like me. Good. Skepticism runs in the family. That is why I will show this to you now. As you read this sentence, your phone will ring and the call will be from John. I didn't have time to read the next sentence. My phone had rung. I jumped, gripping the papers tighter as I stared at the phone. John was calling. "Hey buddy, what's going on?" "Hey, can I call you back?" I asked, my voice a bit shaky. "Yeah, is everything okay?" I hung up. "Sorry, John." I glanced at the next sentence. The first thing that he will say to you as you pick up the phone is, "Hey buddy, what's going on?" Before you tell him that you will need to call him back. Your voice will shake, and he will ask you if everything is alright before you hang up on him mid-sentence. I could not believe what in the actual hell was happening. To the letter. He knew what was going to happen to the letter. But I thought to myself, of course, this could just be a rather strange coincidence. I know that you will most likely think this is a coincidence. Shit. And I can prove that it's not. At exactly 2:20 p.m., your computer will let you know that it requires an update, and it will begin to restart. At 2:21 p.m., the mailman will deliver the Bob Woodard book you've been waiting to read for some time. The list went on and on. I stood there, incredulously reading the list of predictions my grandfather could not have possibly made. But yet all of it happened. My grandpa was not lying. Loud Place was real. Now that you believe me, I should get to the point. It's not like your grandpa to waste time. There is no other way to say this other than to say it. The world is going to end, and it will end horribly. Humanity will not go gentle into that good night. It will not end with a whimper. It will be cataclysmic. Every event follows a cascade of causes. While this was an inevitability since the Big Bang, the end of the world is largely the result of humanity. I will detail to you how the world will end. As you expect, the end of the world is largely humanity's fault. The nuclear weapons we developed during what would be known as the Cold War will be our ultimate downfall. These weapons, while not inherently destructive, will inevitably be placed in the hands of those incompetent and unfit to hold them. It will start as mere verbal escalation between the United States and North Korea. At first, it will appear that these tensions will die down. The countries will appear to be relatively peaceful with one another. At the very least, that coexistence is possible. But men are such violent creatures, and it is within their nature to escalate. The Mueller investigation into Trump's connections with Russia begins to scare him. He becomes particularly volatile, erratic, dangerous, He decides that one day, military action against the North Koreans is necessary to prevent further nuclear proliferation. In an unannounced attack, he sends special forces to undergo an extrajudicial killing of the North Korean leader. The plan fails, and the North Korean leader is not only angry, but scared. He feels threatened. In a fit of mania, he orders his ranking generals to direct multiple nuclear weapon strikes to the homeland of the United States. Their technology, it was far more advanced than the United States intelligence was prepared for. The US underestimated their arsenal. We are unable to defend the homeland. Millions die in the immediate impact. Hundreds of millions. The catastrophe is isolated to very small parts of each country at first, but soon enough, the nuclear fallout begins to spread across the country. Radioactivity seeps into the rest of the country. Millions of people become sick. They bald. They vomit profusely. Food becomes inedible, and those who choose to eat anyways become sicker. Families attempt to flee to airports, but no plane is authorized to take off. Many make attempts to drive as far from the nuclear blast as possible. But those who saw opportunity in the chaos took it upon themselves to loot and rob those families who were trying to make it to safety. Many are killed, brutally, in these attacks. We retaliate, and North Korea is unable to defend themselves. One of the warheads is misfired and strikes Moscow. Moscow retaliates, and we return the favor. Much of these countries are destroyed by the nuclear detonations, but the majority of the deaths will not come from the immediate impact of the warheads. When chaos is the cause, savagery is the result. The nuclear winter that results leaves people in desperate need for food, water, and safety. Those who have not died from radioactive poisoning are left to fight for the scraps of what remains. Those countries which are not targeted are unable to grow food for themselves. They have nothing to eat. They have nothing to live for. Suicide rates skyrocket. In a few short years, the populations of humans is reduced to just a few 100,000. In just a decade, all of humanity has died. I have considered every variable, manipulating each of them to determine if this outcome can be avoided. It cannot. I have considered every variable, every cause, and toyed with the idea that perhaps the knowledge of such variables could change their outcomes. But in each model, humanity drew to a close on the same day. These variables do not like to be changed. They are inseparably tied to those causes that created them, and those causes to their parent causes. I will withhold the date that all of this will occur. While knowledge is an ultimate good, it does a man no good to know when he will die. Believe me. Although I know what will happen to you, and I know what will become of humanity, knowledge of the future is always perspective until it is lived. What I know now is that I will love you, and wish you could grow up to become the man that will make your father proud. My only regret is that I am unable to live to comfort you as the world concludes the final chapter of mankind. With all love, Jipa, January 1st, 1971. The date, nearly 3 decades before I was born, and the letter was addressed to me. I put the letter down and thought about what was to come. I have never felt so impotent. I thought about all my options. And then I realized I had none.